Morning, everyone. Sorry for the lateness of the meeting today. Can I welcome everybody? And do we have any apologies?
No apologies, Chair.
We do have Councillor Brian Lodge. He's not been. Right. Could you record Councillor Brian Lodge? Thank you. Item 3 is: do we have any reason to exclude the public and press this morning? No. Right. Before I go any further, sorry, I have agreed, that's one of the reasons we're a bit late this morning, I've agreed to move the item 8 further up the agenda for a member of public to take part before our officers on item 7 with the Equalities report starts. So we will have public questions and petitions, and then I will bring item 8 after then, if that is all right with the members. Is that agreed? Thank you. So, do we have any declarations of interest this morning on any of the items today? No. Thank you very much. Item 5, do we have any public questions today, Deborah? No, no. John? No, thank you. So, item 5, which is a request to review the steps taken by the Council in response to a petition. And we have John. We'll start the report off, please. Thank you, John.
Thank you very much, Chair. Just as an introduction, to state that this is the first such request we've had, so we're on a little bit of a learning curve in terms of how we deal with it. We think we've drafted a report in accordance with the petition scheme in terms of how we deal with it. In a nutshell, a petition was received from Mr. Christopher Beck, lead petitioner, considered by the Council on 1st December, referred to the relevant executive member who, through his method of investigation, instructed a highways officer to look into the issue. Highways officer responded, and the formal response was sent based on the officer's findings to Mr. Beck within the required timescale of 28 days. We have since received a request from Mr. Beck. When we send responses, lead petitioners are advised that they can request this committee to review the steps taken in response to a petition. I have tried to make it clear that the issue at hand is the level of investigation into the petition request and not the actual decision. We have Mr. Christopher Beck here, and we have Andrew Shearer, Highways Officer. So I'll pass over to you, Chair, in terms of which one you'd like to hear first.
Thank you, John. Mr. Beck, would you like to speak first and explain? Press on the mic.
Do I have to keep my finger on this?
No.
Oh, okay. No. Thank you very much. And first of all, I'd like to offer my appreciation for advancing this matter so that I didn't have to wait. But at the same time, I lost another half hour in bed. But, it's a trade-off, isn't it? Now, if you have had a chance to look at my 10-page letter, Section 2 regards the right to an impartial review and recusal. Now, I raise that because in the preamble to, I haven't seen the order paper, but in the preamble and just now, your chairman said that anybody with a vested interest should declare it. And in a sense, the party under Terry Fox decided to absent themselves from the meeting December 1. Even though the council were an unrelated party, they were merely renting space from the university. And I've subsequently learned that the picket line was in fact an unlawful picket line, but the decision had already been made at that point. And in any event, what Mr. Fox said that they were moving in solidarity and unison with the union. So in a sense, the members who decided not to go to the council have skin in the game. They were saying, well, look, we're going to win some degree of political favor here with the university union, even though we're not even involved in this. And so some people disagree with that point. Well, that's fine, as I think it's an independent decision. If you feel that you still have a right to attend and not recuse, that's fine. I'm just raising the issue because I would personally distance myself at this point.
Thank you,
So that's purely relating to the way in which the committee is set up at the moment. Obviously, I would like the right to come back on other issues later that are in the order paper and some others that weren't.
Well, I've had some people indicate to that point. So I've got Councillor Argentio that would like to answer your point, Mr. Beck.
There is a very proper tradition in this country of not crossing picket lines, and that's what we did on that day as both the Labour group and the Green group. So I think it's very unfair to say that. It was a very difficult decision because we want to do our duty as councillors. However, there are certain matters that are above politics, and it's not for scoring points, it's what people do.
Thank you. Would you like to carry on, Mr. Beck?
Thank you. So I'm just offering the people the opportunity here, if they feel that there was a decision that was made that, in a sense, gained them favor with that particular union in the future, then they might wish to recuse themselves at this point. But I'll move on if that's the case. Three sections from in the package that you have in front of you has been taken or accepted from the letter, and I'll refer to them now. The number 3 in the letter, Councillor Roger Davison, former Lord Mayor Roger Davison, came to the crossing, and he's very familiar. He's a local councillor. He knows what's going on, and he said, "Wow!" He said, "Wow, this is." He saw people crossing without using the crossing, without using the barrier, because there's a barrier that's missing. The crossing is half built. And he said, wow, I didn't realize that this went on. And so you could see a picture, and you wouldn't take in the fact that when pedestrians are involved, that there are great safety issues. He could see that there were cars that were advancing through the red light. So what I'm saying under 3, and I'm not trying to make a point here for the actual petition, I'm just using it by way of illustration. I'm saying it would have given standing to Councillors Johnson, Paul Wood, Julie Grocott, Mesa Iqbal, and staff and other parties, considering the action on this matter, to visit the site in order to view pedestrian and motorist behaviour as Councillor Roger Davison. I appreciate you have a transport officer here today, but I think when you have eyes on the ground, when the facts are in front of you, then it's a lot more concrete. It opens your eyes. So as far as I know, Councillor Johnson didn't confer with his colleague, and it would have opened his eyes when he saw how pedestrians and the traffic behave in this location. And remember, this is Roger Davison, who is very familiar with the area, and Councillor Barbara Masters is also familiar with the location, wrote on December 15, a momentary lapse of concentration is all it takes for another serious accident to occur. And only yesterday, even with the crossing on the other side, the cars have a tendency to look ahead to the roundabout and think to the roundabout rather than the red light in front of them. So they're already anticipating the next move. And that happens on the side where the road narrows because they're competing to be the first out of the shot. So my point there then is that the no on-site visits were made by key councillors to make a valid assessment in the process. And then we're looking at the decision process itself, the risk assessment. And in the letter of response I got from Douglas Johnson, there was no indication of quantification. I understand from an earlier discussion with a traffic officer that, in fact, there are quantifications because your information is only as good as the numbers that it's based on. And what we need to do is obviously have numbers that indicate what's the probability of the risk, how many accidents are there, what kind of accidents, and do it by demographics. I mean, I'm getting on in years, so I'm probably less valuable a member of society than, say, a child of 8 who is knocked down in front of me. Maybe you sort of put in a weighting for that. So I think we need to look at those numbers in the review, and maybe we'll hear later on that those numbers were considered. And then maybe we'd have to look at the methodology and consider whether your statistics are as sound as my statistics and on and so forth. But it wasn't in the letter, that's what I'm saying, in the letter of response from Councillor Johnson. And the next part that was excerpted from the letter concerns that I talked to Amy. I talked to some people, Amy. I talked to the people who put the crossing in 6 years ago. And they said, well, yeah, we wondered why it was only half completed. We don't, maybe it's because it's narrow on that section. We don't know. But there was certainly an anomaly at the time, and that's gone on for 6 years. And now we're seeing that the chickens are coming home to roost. So if a historic search validates this conclusion, then perhaps the council should be looking to the original road construction company to honour the contract, or if they're not culpable, at the very least, complete the construction. And in the meantime, any accident that results it could be assessed as negligence by the party or parties responsible. And so, again, a quantitative analysis, given limitation of funds or whatever, should look at the expected monetary value of construction versus the settlement claims from accident victims and see, well, is it really worth not putting in a couple of fences here? And as I kept going on December 1st, one more child victim is too many. In the event of such an unavoidable tragedy, it would be on all of us. And now I want to return to the elephant in the room. And I've been told that this is not relevant. But it seems to me, and I think it's summed up best in the letter that Councillor Johnson wrote to me. And I don't know if you've all got access to that. It's a one-page letter. And he says, I don't know if you were at the meeting, at the council meeting, December 1. Wow. Wow. He's made a decision. He's not listened to the petition. He hasn't taken the opportunity to review the film that's available online. He doesn't know. It took 3 minutes. So I realize that the decision is made in a very linear sense, but we all know things go on behind the scene. And if around 40 councillors had been at that presentation, I'm saying there may have been a groundswell, there may have been a critical mass, there may have been a tipping point of scuttlebutt behind the scenes where they'd say, yeah, maybe we should look at this, maybe we should look at this. But all of that was denied because whilst I had the right to speak, I didn't have the right to be heard. So that, to my mind, is also something that should be considered as part of the failure and misstep in the process. Thank you.
Thank you. Today, I apologise, I should have announced that Councillor Johnson is isolating, so unable to attend and answer personally. However, we do have an Highways officer here that can answer some of your questions. But before I bring in Andrew, Councillor Rooney has indicated that he would like to make a point. Councillor Rooney?
Thank you, Chair. I'm just asking that someone sort of clarifies what we're hoping to achieve by this discussion this morning, because I'm not entirely clear. I'll be quite honest with you. Are we asking that there's some sort of apology by Councillor Johnson, or a site visit to the place in question, or that Councillor Johnson should change his mind, or the housing office, the highways officers should change their minds, that the scheme should be, which appears not to have been completed, is completed or redesigned? Or are we being asked to make a judgment on whether or not the procedure for dealing with petitions was dealt with properly? And I'm a bit confused as to what would be a good outcome this morning for Mr. Beck in particular, but for all those concerned. And if somebody would clarify that for me, I would be I would really appreciate that.
Councillor Rooney. Councillor Otten, you just...
Yeah. If I could just add to that query, I mean, it does seem to me that obviously, as we've been advised, we're slightly in uncharted territory here. Clearly, we've been referred on a matter of process as the process being followed. But I think, to my mind, that is not just was the petition properly handled and received, but that petition was it properly considered by the executive member? I think I think Mr. Beck is asking us to do that, and I think that's a reasonable thing to ask, because it's not just did you tick the boxes procedurally in hearing the petition, but did you think about it, and have you acted on those thoughts? That is part of the whole point of the process. So I think that is something that would be useful. I mean, I appreciate that obviously this is the first time we've had this kind of report before us, but it would have been useful perhaps to have an outline. Maybe we can have one now of. Because we know how we receive petitions, but in terms of the council's rules, in terms of the principles of good governance and so on, it would be good to be clear exactly what duties we have in terms of how we respond to petitions, and for that to have been laid out in the report. Obviously, it hasn't been. And also, I suppose, because under section 3.6, the points made by Mr. Beck as to what hasn't been done, if there is anything that can be said. If there was something that has been done that might answer those points, that might also have been in the report. And then we can say, is that a sufficient answer to those points? Obviously, we can ask and do this verbally, but it would have been useful to have more of this in the report.
I'll bring in John at the minute. John's the officer that's been dealing with this.
Yes, Chair. Councillor Otten is correct. It is the first one we've had, so it has been a bit of a learning curve, but we understand it is simply a review of how the council has dealt with the petition. From my point of view, in terms of what I've done admin-wise, I've no issues with that. And it would also include the follow-up response as well. Now, I'm not convinced or sure that there's anything further in terms of detail regarding governance in how we respond. I think you just have to be happy that officers have undertook sufficient investigations and responded to the lead petitioner accordingly. I think it'd be useful to hear from Mr. Shearer in terms of the officer investigations.
John, that's useful. Andrew, would you like to introduce yourself and answer some of those points, please?
I'm a transport planner at Sheffield City Council, and I'm involved in various projects in the city. One more recently is the South West Bus Corridors project, Transformative Fund project, which is bus public transport improvements and, where possible, pedestrian improvements along Excel Road and Abbeydale Road. And that is, to some extent, why I've been involved in this petition and been involved along with other colleagues in the team in investigating the petition that came in and the points that were raised. If I just take each of the points in turn that Mr. Beck has raised. In terms of the point one, no site visits made by key councillors to make a valid assessment. Obviously, Councillor Johnson isn't here today, but officers certainly have been on site on a number of occasions as part of the South West Bus Corridors project, in terms of the design and investigations for that project, in terms of improvements that can be made along Exhall Road and around the Hunters Bar area. So officers, including the designer for the project, has been out there on a number of occasions. Also senior officers from the Strategic Transport, Sustainability and Infrastructure team have also visited the site and aware of the crossing and the roundabout and what we're trying to achieve in that area for public transport, but also where possible for pedestrians. So that has taken place. In terms of the decision process, risk assessment not quantified. As part of our capital approval process, details of local safety schemes and pedestrian crossing schemes, along with other capital projects, are presented to the executive member, so to Councillor Johnson. And in terms of road safety and road safety schemes, due to the limited amount of funding available for road safety and for road safety schemes, we have to prioritise locations based on the highest number of injury accidents. So officers in the road safety team review the accidents across Sheffield and determine those sites where there's a high number of injury accidents, and then that effectively forms a priority list of locations where further investigation will be undertaken, not necessarily a scheme introduced, but investigation undertaken in those high priority areas to determine if measures can be introduced to reduce the number of accidents in those locations. So that's conducted annually, and a number of road safety projects, effectively a list of projects come from those investigations. Now, unfortunately, the pedestrian crossing Hunters Bar roundabout doesn't feature on this list of road safety schemes, and that's because of that quantified evidence that there just simply isn't the number of injury accidents in that location in terms of in comparison to other locations across the city. So it doesn't form it isn't on that list of road safety schemes. There has been one slight injury accident at that crossing in the last 5 years, according to the data, and unfortunately that doesn't warrant, in terms of our road safety funding, high enough priority on the list of schemes for interventions. However, what we are doing at this location as part of the South West Bus Corridors Transforming Cities Fund project is investigating possible improvements for pedestrians at this crossing as part of that project. So accessibility improvements, trying to improve, if we can, or investigating if we can make improvements at that crossing for pedestrians. So that's a piece of work that's ongoing at the moment. So whilst it doesn't form on the road safety fund list, if there are improvements that can be made as part of our Transforming Cities Fund project, then we will certainly investigate that, or we are investigating that at the moment. As part of the South West Bus Corridors project, and that's recently been out for consultation, so the scheme is certainly not confirmed at this point. It's our proposals for the corridor. As part of that proposal, we are investigating potentially removing the uphill bus lane, which is from Hunters Bar roundabout up to Rustlings Road junction. That, if we do that, and again that's not confirmed that will be removed at this point, but if that bus bus lane was removed, that would certainly help with the traffic manoeuvres on the approach to the pedestrian crossing, because as vehicles are exiting the roundabout from Hunter's Bar, they're trying to merge into the outside lane before they come to the bus lane. And obviously that merging of traffic is obviously accelerating and braking near the crossing area. So if that scheme was to go, or that part of the scheme was to go ahead, that would help reduce the number of vehicle movements that take place close to the crossing, as vehicles will have a longer distance of road to merge further up the hill. The final point, the council has not investigated whether this is a case of negligence on part of the parties responsible. In terms of the crossing itself, there is so the pedestrian crossing is to the southwest of Hunter's Bar roundabout on the uphill section of Exclusion Road. There's a pedestrian barrier which is installed on the northern side of that pedestrian island. So this is the island in the centre of the road. The crossing's 2 stages, so you cross the first lane of traffic. There's a central island, pedestrian island, and then you cross the second part of the road. So there is a barrier on the northern side of that island. Unfortunately, there isn't enough width as it is at the moment for a pedestrian barrier to be introduced on the southern side of the pedestrian island, really without impacting upon the space for pedestrians crossing. So the crossing was improved or upgraded in 2015. And as part of that upgrade, it was changed from effectively a straight across crossing, so the island was still there, but you just walk straight across to a staggered crossing, which some view to be a safer way to cross the road, in that you have to cross one section and then turn towards the oncoming traffic before you cross the second leg of the crossing. And as part of that, there was a final decision to omit or not include the pedestrian barrier from the southern side of the pedestrian island, which was a joint decision undertaken and agreed by all parties, which included Amy, Sheffield City Council and South Yorkshire Police, with the recommendation that the situation would be continued to be monitored. And obviously, which it has through the accident statistics, which we analyse, and suggest that there's been 1 injury accident in the last 5 years. So I hope that covers the three main points that were more relevant to the officers.
Thank you, Andrew.
Thank you.
Councillor Aries has indicated he wants to speak, and then Councillor Rooney.
Yes, thank you, Chair. Thanks for that information. I mean, I've got no axe to grind because I'm not a member. I don't represent that particular ward. However, I do know where the location is that you're referring to and where the crossing is. You talked about the criteria which enables you to make a decision as to whether that should be a priority in terms of your from your perspective as a highways officer. But within the formulation of that criteria, to what extent is local knowledge taken into consideration in your deliberations? Because I think the point that Mr. Beck is one of the points that Mr. Beck is trying to make is that as a local resident, he sees near dangers, near misses, the dangers on a day-to-day basis, which I know from previous experience that doesn't always get picked up in the deliberations that engineers in highways actually make. So I'm trying to get some clarity on just how to what extent local knowledge has a bearing on the recommendations that you eventually make.
Yeah, thank you. I would need to refer to my road safety colleagues and team to give you the full details of the way that that is investigated. But essentially, they work and are required to work on quantified statistics, so the number of injury accidents that take place in locations. The colleagues will probably be aware of other locations where there is certainly community concerns about road safety and dangers on the road. But because of the limited amount of money that is available, specifically for road safety schemes, they have to work on a quantified evidence base to form that priority list, and that is based on the number of injury accidents that take place, which they then will analyse those locations and determine if any interventions. There are some locations where it may not be possible to make improvements, road safety improvements, but they'll certainly analyse those locations to form that priority list and determine where interventions can be introduced. But obviously where there is opportunities to make improvements at locations where we're introducing other projects which aren't necessarily road safety projects, so the public transport improvements, obviously people need to walk or to get to a bus stop, obviously in order to do that, if we can introduce pedestrian improvements as part of this public transport project, we'll certainly seek to do that. And obviously Exel Road, and particularly around Hunters Bar, is a busy area for pedestrians. You know, a lot of people getting on and off buses, and if there's improvements that we can make in that area as part of that project, while it's not specifically funded through road safety, if there's other accessibility improvements that we can make for pedestrians, we'll certainly seek to do that. But as I say, the investigations are still ongoing in that area, so nothing is confirmed at this point, but the designer's certainly looking at that area, Hunters Bar roundabout, and at that location, at that crossing, to determine if any other further improvements could be made.
Thank you, Councillor Rooney.
No, could I just come back? It was really an observation that in terms of the governance and moving forward, we're in a transition period where we are moving from the executive scrutiny model to local area committees. Whether that can be picked up by you know, the issue of, you know, how you incorporate local knowledge and that into... Absolutely,
that's a good point, Councillor Aries. As you're probably aware, Mr Beck, we are moving to a new governance after May, where we will be sitting on committees. So full council will not be the same as it has been in the past. So people will be able to bring their petitions and questions to committees where it will be more localised. So this point of yours, Councillor Aries, will be passed on and recorded for committees to be considered this as, you know, as a recommendation, because it is a good point.
Could I make a suggestion just on that one point, and with the transport officer here, I think it's useful. In the year 2022, we must have computer technology where if you have a camera pointed at that question's site, and then you built in some kind of algorithm that monitored when the lights were on and off and when traffic intruded or pedestrians were breaching the invisible barrier, that this would be flagged. And so you wouldn't just get local knowledge, you would also have facts. You could speed the film up, it would indicate, you know, the number of errors, the number of intrusions into the space and so on. I don't know if such a thing exists, but I'm sure some bright person could create it.
Thank you. That'll be noted and looked at. Thank you, Mr Beck. Can I ask that we speed this part up of the process of the agenda, because we haven't got to the main agenda yet. Councillor Rooney.
Yeah, I'm in danger of repeating what I said earlier. I think we've just had a 10-minute discussion about the wrong thing. I think what we should have been discussing is whether or not the process was followed properly.
Can I just interject here? As a chair, I've allowed this purely because, as Mr. Beck has indicated, he felt that the circumstances surrounding the council that day was unique. So I've allowed him to get more information, and the fact that Councillor Johnson isn't here to put his point across. But I get your point, Councillor Rooney. We're here today to look at the recommendation of whether the petition was considered and the process was considered properly. But whilst we have got Andrew here, I've allowed these questions. However, I'm asking now that we speed it up along.
Yeah, I mean, I think the discussion we've just had about the intricacies of this particular solution to a safety problem should follow after we've decided whether or not the process has been followed properly. And I think there were exceptional circumstances on that day, and my simplistic answer would be, let's start again and do it again. And then hopefully this time you will get, I believe, Mr. Beck, what you would consider a proper hearing, because that day was particularly chaotic. And I think maybe in the interests of being open and fair, you should get another opportunity to present that, because, as you rightly said, and not for gaining favour from the trade unions, but on a matter of principle that I have held for most of my adult life, I did not cross that picket line. So there were a lot of extenuating circumstances on that day, and my suggestion, maybe simplistically, is let's start again.
Right, does anybody want to add to that? Because I had Councillor Otten and I had Councillor Avery, and now I've got Councillor Agenzio indicating. So, well, Councillor Avery, do you want to come? And you're next, Councillor.
Thanks, Chair. A couple of things come to mind with this. I'm aware of this crossing. I do understand it. And what's been interesting is that the difficult part of the crossing is on the south side, because the north side has got good clear views up the road on the approach, and yet it appears the barrier is protecting the north side and not the south side, which is a dangerous side. So that's the first point I'd like to make. Secondly, about the actual response from the officer, I think the issue I have is it isn't specific enough on the actual issue that was brought in the petition. It's very much generalised, and I find the second response to mention that it was a petition of just 9 signatures is irrelevant. It doesn't matter how many people have put a petition forward. It's about how the response is put together and whether it addresses the issue that was specifically raised. So those are my 2 points on this one. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Otten.
Thank you. Yes. So, I mean, I appreciate what's been said. I think the merits of the crossing, and particularly the information we've heard today, does tie in with the whole procedural question as well. So I'll try and kind of combine them. I'm aware of the crossing as well. It's on my. I have crossed it as a pedestrian a number of times, probably mostly before 2015. It is on my route home if I drive, so I've driven through it a number of times, and it is worth. I mean, I'm looking at it now on Google Maps as well. And it is interesting that you come out, as a motorist, you come off a roundabout, you get through a set of traffic lights, you kind of think, well, I've navigated the difficult bit, I'm in the clear, and it's possibly natural not to expect people to be crossing immediately after the roundabout and the traffic lights. So, you know, I will pay more attention in future now myself, because I haven't quite appreciated, although I was aware of the missing barrier, that might be the case. So, clearly, we've heard more information now from Mr. Shearer, which would have been useful to go into the answer that Councillor Johnson gave to Mr. Beck. But it could be even more useful if it was even clearer. And so can I ask, are you saying that this crossing is as designed, it is as intended, and it is safer than the crossing it replaced in 2015. Is that your belief?
No, I'm not going to comment on whether it's safer or not, because that's not for me to suggest. That would be for possibly for a road safety auditor, not myself. So I'm not suggesting it's safer at all. What we are suggesting is that a final decision was made to not include the pedestrian barrier on the southern side, and that was agreed by Amy, Sheffield City Council and South Yorkshire Police.
So I'm a little bit confused now. Was the funding for that alteration in 2015, did it come out of this process that scores all the danger zones in the city?
I'd need to confirm that, but I don't believe that's the case. I believe that the upgrade or the improvement to the crossing was from separate funding, but I'd need to confirm that with my road safety colleagues.
Okay, so on that basis, I think the question is still open, that you know, some money was spent on a crossing to what is supposed to be a safer design, the staggered design, but we're not convinced it was a safer design. I think it's quite reasonable for Mr. Beck to come here and say, do you know, Council, do you know what you're doing? And I think the answer from Councillor Johnson should reflect that. I would comment, these are comments now, also, I do think Councillor Johnson should have watched the webcast of the petition being presented before he wrote his answer. That is perfectly reasonable thing to do, thing to expect. I think he should also have gone and had a look at the site. I don't see why he shouldn't. So I would like to recommend that this committee recommends that Councillor Johnson looks at the webcast, he goes and visits the site, he has another conversation with transport officers and, you know, gets to the bottom of what has really happened here. Yeah, those are my recommendations that we think that Councillor Johnson should do in order to properly respond to the petition. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Otten. Councillor Argentio.
Hi, can I just say that I totally disagree with that kind of request from Councillor Otten. I know this crossing really well. I lived just up the road for 10 years. It's still, you know, somewhere where I go at least twice a week because it's my local park. It's the border, the roundabout is the border of borderline between my ward and the Exclusion ward. So I know this, and I'm not saying it's safe in the state it is, but I just want to say that I have very, very good local knowledge of having lived in that area for 26 years nearly. I believe that the process was followed properly, and the answer that Mr. Beck would get, was he to represent his petition, although in principle it would be a nice thing, would be exactly the same, because this is what happens, unfortunately, with lots of these road safety crossings that people ask. In my ward, there are 2 at the moment under request, and because again, the incidence rate is not high enough. They're not high enough on the priority list. Unfortunately, that side is, shamelessly underfunded. And we have to be realistic about how we spend our officers' time. It's unfair to ask them to redo a piece of work they've done already. Just so that we can repeat something that didn't happen for exceptional circumstances. I think it would be a waste of money to ask officers to spend more time on this rather than get on with all the, the work that they have on. And it's with all due respect to Mr. Beck and all other petitioners, but we also have to use the time properly. So I won't waste any more time here today.
Thank you, Councillor. Very, very quickly come in.
Thank you, Chair. I just wanted to agree with what Councillor Argentio has raised. I think Councillor Johnson did provide a response. I appreciate it wasn't at the meeting because of exceptional circumstances, like has been noted. Responses aren't always what we would want from questions or petitions, but like Councillor Argentio has raised, there's so many crossings in the city that deserve addressing, so many that don't even have any kind of island in there. I can think of several in my ward that are in really bad state. And I can think of lots worse in other wards as well, actually, where people have sadly died because there hasn't been crossings and there really needs something to be addressed. So it is really important we prioritise how these funds are distributed. So I think that's what Councillor Johnson's raised in his response. And I think it's also important to note that he did suggest about connecting Sheffield, like the officer has raised. Because that is what we need to be looking at when we know that we can't fund improvements under one pot of money. We need to be thinking about how we can do it elsewhere. So I think he has said it would be good to have some feedback on the consultation response, and officers would look into that. So I think that is the appropriate course of action in this case. So I suggest we just note this petition. And thank you for your time, and I appreciate your concerns.
Thank you, Councillor Phipps. I hope, Mr. Beck, that you've been able to bring your questions here and got the answers. I hope that you've learned and gained more from the answers the officers given today. I was, as I say, because of the unique circumstances, it didn't happen on the day. We're asked to recommend if this, the committee is being requested to consider whether the council has taken appropriate steps in response to the petition. Well, the process was followed. You brought your petition, and because the officer, the cabinet member, the executive cooperative member was not there, you got a written response. And that is the process. So I'm saying the recommendation, I'm open to a vote on this, that the procedure and that was followed on that day, because that is the procedure and the process. However, you've come today and we've expanded on the answer that you got from Councillor Johnson. So I would suggest that would be sufficient. However, Councillor Otten is indicated. Councillor Otten.
Thank you, Chair. No, yes, I would like to repeat my previous recommendation that I believe that Councillor Johnson should have listened to the webcast, should have visited the site, and should have had sufficient conversation with officers as to be able to give a response on the specifics and not the generality. Should have been able to get to the bottom of why the barrier is missing and so forth. Because the fact we learned today that this is as designed and not half built is something that Mr. Beck should have been advised. So that's my recommendation, that on those 3 points.
Councillor Otten, yes, you jumped the gun. I just wanted us to agree that the process was followed first, and then we could have some recommendations from this committee as to go forward. But first of all, can we vote on the fact that the process was followed?
Well, I'm not sure that my recommendations aren't relating to the process. Yes, the petition was heard and it was responded to. On that point, yes, I agree the process was followed. I'm happy to vote for that. But to say that means the process was followed in its entirety, that the petition was properly considered by the executive member, no, that's what my recommendations relate to. You could say that's part of the process too. So I'm not sure. I'm not sure I understand the distinction that you're making.
Sorry, Councillor Otten, I was just going to separate it. However, if you want, I'm open to suggestions of the board. But if you want to say addition on, amendment, as an amendment to what we're asked, is if the process was followed. Your amendment, you're saying that, you'd like Councillor Johnson to look at the webcast and visit the site. And that is additional. Councillor Argencio.
Can I ask for clarification? Does the process imply that an exec member needs to visit every site for every petition? It doesn't. So it is completely ridiculous to suggest that exec members would have to then go on every single site. We would never end. So it's not part of the process. So the process was followed, as you said, and I would want to vote on that. Then if there are any suggestions, we'll take a vote on that as well.
Thank you, Councillor Argencio. I'll get some advice from John.
I'll go back to my earlier point. This is the first such request we've had. It is a test case, basically, but personally, my opinion, it's your decision, my opinion is that the process was followed correctly from my point of view, the petition process. There's always going to be people who are not happy with the level of investigation, the decision made. So if we decide to, on that basis, we could potentially get every single lead petitioner coming back, if they're not happy with the decision, querying the process. I appreciate it's something we do need to look into going forward in terms of the new committee structure, definitely. But that's all I can advise really at the moment, Chair.
Thank you, John. That's what I would suggest, and we'll probably take a vote on it, that we recommend that the process was followed. However, we'll feed into the new governance system that the committee, it's going to be an entirely new process, and we could ask that the decision makers take a site visit. We cannot insist, we trust that these people are going to take the decisions on our behalf. As the officer has already stated, he visited the site, and officers are the ones that are giving advice to us as politicians. So I'm inclined to disagree with you, Councillor Otten. However, we'll take a vote. Sorry, Mr. Beck, I'm sorry, we can't ask you to come in at this point. This is now Councillor's decision to be made now, and we've got to move on.
It relates to the process. I mean, the fact that Councillor Johnson never heard the petition. I mean, I would have thought that would be in the first part of the process.
Mr. Beck, no, that is not the process. The process is that you bring it to the council. We cannot always ask that the decision maker is there for other, reasons beyond our control. As today, Councillor Johnson cannot be here.
No. I meant he didn't come to he did not avail himself of the 3-minute address on the 1st of December, either in person or through the closed circuit camera footage. So that was number one. Number two, we're relying on the council officers, but the decision makers are the councillors. So surely the councillors should appraise themselves of the matter. And so I would disagree with my councillors here who say that site visits shouldn't be included as part of the protocol for the process.
Thank you, Mr. Beck. Councillor Dale, sorry.
Thank you, Chair. I think just for clarity, we've only recently been visual online, live streamed. Historically, when a petition came to full council, it had to have 5,000 signatures before it would spark a debate. So the fact that a lot of councillors weren't there would have made no difference whatsoever. So the petition would have either had no action at all, directed to the Scrutiny Committee, or directed to the what historically was a cabinet member but now cooperative exec. Is that correct? I'm just trying to get that right. Okay. And then I think historically it has been a courtesy of the cabinet member or cooperative executive to extend an invite to the petitioner to meet on site. It's never been part of the process in situ. It's not part of that process. However, it has always been a courtesy. And I think, yes, as politicians, we are decision makers, but we are not engineers and we are not experts. So we have to take advice from those more qualified in order to do so. I'm just trying to make things a bit more clear that it's not that we don't, as politicians, we don't want to make those decisions. It's that we have to take the professional advice of highways engineers and what have you. Does that make it a bit more clear?
Thank you, Councillor Dale. Right, now we need to move on, and we've got to, we'll take a vote on this then. My recommendation is point 4.1. Does the committee agree that the process was, the appropriate steps in response to the petition was taken? can we take a vote on that then, please? You want to put the amendment in? Quickly, Joe.
So just to add to that, save that, we recommend that further that Councillor Johnson views the webcast. We recommend that he visits the site. I'm going to be clear, I don't mean to say that's a protocol that applies to every petition. On this occasion, I want to recommend that he visits the site and that he's a further conversation with officers and responds to Mr. Beck with better, more detailed information.
Okay then, we'll vote on that, my recommendation and your amendment, all as one.
All as one,
Can we vote on that? Yeah. Does anybody disagree with that? Councillor Argentia?
I disagree. I want to take it separately because the petition, today we're here not to decide whether the protocol was followed, the how was followed. We've agreed that it has been followed. The fact that Councillor Otten wants to put an amendment, I think should be taken separately because that is not part of the protocol. The protocol doesn't say that an exec member needs to visit a site. The protocol says that an exec member takes advice from experts, the officers who have the qualification and the know-how in very technical situations.
Yeah, Councillor Dale has already outlined that. So, John, what do you suggest? We take the recommendation first or the amendment? Do we vote on the amendment?
I think as Councillor Argentio said, do the two parts separately. Vote on, if you agree that the process has been followed, yes, no, then decide on Councillor Otten's suggested amendment.
Which is my way around. I just wanted to make sure we're doing the following process. Right. Can we vote on?
I'm sorry to be a pain. I'm still not clear. The point of it being an amendment is that, yes, the process has been followed up to a point, but it hasn't been followed entirely. So to have a vote on the process, you're going to force us to vote against. I mean, that's the danger of putting it that way, which I don't particularly wish to vote against.
That unfortunately, is how amendment works, I'm afraid.
Well, no, it's not how amendments work. Normally you vote on the amendment before the substantive. You're choosing to do the other way around, which you have every right to, Chair, but that obviously that means I will have to vote against because the procedure's only been followed up to a point. Sorry.
Right. We'll take the amendment first then, as we do in council, and that's the process. Right. Can we vote on Councillor Otten's amendment to ask Councillor Johnson to look at the website and visit the site and
a further meeting with officers and a fuller response to Mr. Beck?
Okay, can we vote on that, please? All those in favour? Thank you, that's carried. Those against? Recorded, thank you. That's carried. Right, can we vote on the recommendation, which is the process was followed correctly with the added amendment? All those in favour? Thank you. That's unanimous. Thank you very much. Thank you, Mr. Beck, for coming today. I hope that you have had a full hearing and we have considered it. I think we have. We've given it a length of time, not unexpected. So thank you. And thank you, Andrew, for coming along. Can I ask, you now can leave. You can stay if you wish. Same with you, Mr. Beck. You can listen.
Thanks, everybody, for the time. Good to see democracy in action in these hallowed chambers. 1897, amazing, isn't it?
Thank you, Mr. Beck. Could you mind switch your mic off? Yes. And we will ask officers to come in for the next part. If anybody wants a comfort break while they are arriving, because we've got a couple of minutes. The agenda. Thank you. Oh, sorry, we're missing a councillor. We'll just wait for Councillor Aries to join us. Thank you, councillors. We're ready to commence now. We're on to item 6, which is minutes of the previous meeting. Can we all agree that these are a true and accurate record? Yes, agreed. Thank you, councillors. Do we have any matters that you wish to erase from those minutes of the 10th of February? No, we're all agreed. We're all happy. Thank you very much. So we now move on to item 7, which is the annual Equalities report, and we do have various officers here in attendance. Would you mind introducing yourselves for the board, please? Thank you.
I'm Adele Robinson, the Equalities and Engagement Manager.
My name's Adiola Banjoko, I'm an Equality and Engagement Officer.
Hi, I'm Laurie Brennan. I'm the Head of Policy and Partnerships, and I've got responsibility for ultimately equalities and duties in the Council.
Hello everyone, I'm Rabina Sharif and I'm the Senior Equality and Engagement Officer in post from 24th of January.
Hi, I'm Rosie May. I'm a Senior EDI Officer in HR.
Hi, I'm Michelle Hassan, one of the HR Service Managers with lead responsibility for EDI for the workforce. Thank you.
And I'm Claire Cornet. I'm Head of HR and I've got the responsibility for EDI in the workforce.
Thank you very much, and sorry that you've had a long way outside. The item took a bit longer than we were expecting. So, who would like to start? Thank you, Adele.
I just want to start by saying I'm not going to go through the report in detail because obviously there's quite a lot of content here. I'll focus on a few key points. I'll hand over to my colleagues in HR to go through some of the HR points and then come back to some of the maybe the ways forward and obviously any questions that you have. I think it's clear to say from the report we split it into the 4 objectives that we have as a council on equality. One of the most important points in the first section is objective 1 is around data, and we did last year start an equality monitoring project because we didn't feel that we had enough data in services in relation to equality, and I think that is a major issue going forward, and it is a concern across all protected characteristics, very inconsistent data. I'll come back to workforce diversity. The third point is about being an inclusive city, and I think in this work area over the last year we've done work in relation to quite a lot of awareness events, so around Black History Month, International Women's Day, Holocaust Memorial Day, the Windrush, LGBT History Month, and we've been working with services. It's also important that we've done a lot of work on the Race Equality Commission, but at the moment that will be reporting in May and isn't reporting in this cycle because this report is covering major part of 2020 and going into 2021. And also over the last year, we've also renewed the accessible guides in the cities. We've now signed up to a new 5-year contract for the access guides. In relation to the life chances section, you'll see that there's quite a lot of information in relation to, especially this is covering COVID, so especially the work done in domestic abuse, hate incidents and health inequalities are key in that area. But again, I think one of the most important points going forward is the lack of embedding of equality impact assessments across the organisation, and that's something we've really got to get better at, and that will be on one of my points for going further ahead. And can I hand over to Claire for the workforce diversity?
Thanks, Adele. So as people have seen in the report, there's been little movement in the workforce representation when we compare it against the city's population and for its working age. We are quite concerned because the ONS predictions are that the position for the count for the population is that will change for a further up to 5 percentage points. So whilst we've seen a little positive movement, there's a lot more work that we need to do if that is borne out in the census data, which we're expecting to get later this year. In response to this, however, the last year we have spent developing an ambitious EDI plan aligned to the one-year plan. It focuses on 26 direct commitments to how we're going to ensure that we are more representative. We've got a workforce that's supported whilst they're here, and we're using something called the employee life cycle to drive that work, looking at how we attract from within communities across the city right through to people progressing whilst there are employers and everything in between. We did do a review last year. Adele and I were involved in this under the heading of Future Foundations that identified that as an employer and as an organisation working with communities across the city, we need to do a lot more. And we are focusing on our governance arrangements to ensure that we're holding ourselves to account in a very different way through our Strategic Equality and Inclusion Board, working with our new networks, because we've now got staff representative networks across a range of protected characteristics, which are relatively new, have been in existence for about 12 months. There are still some protected characteristics and non-protected characteristics that we want to get networks set up for. So that's going to be the kind of work we're focusing on for the following year.
Okay, so that's some of the key workforce points. I think looking ahead, some of the things obviously Claire's referred to, and I know we had a conversation last year about this. The census data is not out yet. It is due in May, and we will have further data then and updates we're expecting in July. So next year's report hopefully will be based around the new data, and that will mean there will need to be a lot of work looking at how that relates to, in relation to the protected characteristics. Equality impact assessments, as I said earlier, are not yet embedded across the org. We've had them obviously in place for years, they are done, but whether they're done well, they're very inconsistent, and that's something that we've been working on and we've been doing training on, but it's still an area that we need to further develop in the next year. We also need to ensure equality is embedded in the new governance arrangements, obviously, of the council, including obviously the committee system and local area committees, and that's something that we're working with. And also the Race Equality Commission, when it's finished its reporting, we're going to need to in the next year look at embedding the recommendations from the Race Equality Commission across the organisation. And we're also looking at how we work with our communities, so in terms of engagement and engagement with those who share protected characteristics, and look at whether we have a new online engagement mechanism. So that's something that we're going to be looking at. And I think overall, we need to ensure that we're looking at how equalities is embedded in the new corporate plan as it has been in the one-year plan. They will be some of the key points for the future. Adi, do you want to add anything?
So I actually wrote this report and it took a very, very long time, more than actually needed. I think the profile of the report needs to be promoted more. Services don't even know that this report actually exists, and that's a problem in itself. So there's quite a few gaps in terms of education, young people, and like hate crimes, more in-depth data is needed. So I would like to actually ask councillors if you could speak to your directors or your services or the people that you engage with to actually understand and try and engage with us on the annual Equalities report, and just let them know that it exists, because this is a report that we have a statutory duty for, and if services don't even know that it's a thing, that's a problem in itself. So it needs to be more in the report itself needs to be more embedded in the council. Services need to actually know at this time of the year this report will be happening, so please do send your information across regarding equality and engagement, so it will be more on time and hopefully less pages, because this is a public document and it's not just for councillors and people working in the area, it's also for the people of Sheffield. So if we do want to promote overall inclusivity and engagement, the average person would need to be able to access this. So that's just one of my points. And secondly, so the format definitely needs to change. So if services can give us more information timely, that would be great. And I also think that the report might need to change its format, whether that's a video, trying to go ahead with the times. Yes, it's a statutory document, so maybe having a summary and then maybe having short videos or doing a presentation instead to kind of show how we are following our equality duties as well. because we're in 2022 and I do get it's a statutory document, but at the same time we need to make it appeal to the new people and people that are in Sheffield as well. So I think we need to look at the way we are reporting on this and how we can attract the right people.
Thank you. Actually, one of my questions was, how do we communicate all this? You just answered quite a lot of that by, you know, I'm sure that, you know, public will get switched off by this. They'll start reading it and think, well, you know, it's, thank you, way beyond our capabilities, as we probably do, you know. So your suggestions that you've just put forward, a video, etc., would, I'm sure we would welcome. However, I'll open it up to the board, as people have indicated already they want to speak. Councillor Naz was first. Thank you.
Thank you, Chair. Thank you for the report, by the way. So I've got a couple of questions. You can answer them at the end, that's fine. Page 41, Business Sheffield Grants. Can I request a breakdown of the first column, please? Because you've put in there South Asian, Asian and East Asian. I'd like for it to be broken down. You can email me this later, because I just want to see whether... because I've been speaking to lots of businesses from the South Asia, who represent South Asian groups, who felt that they did not get the support from the business grants. So if you can just break that down for me, that'd be really useful. Page 79, who are Diverse City Development Trust? I've not heard of that organisation before. And what other BAME organisations in the city do you work with? Page 71, BAME disabled and LGBT and female are underrepresented, in particular at chief officer level. What are you doing to ensure we have a diverse background to reflect the communities we serve? I speak to a lot of people who say the recruitment process is extremely difficult. Have we thought of more creative ways of trying to engage and recruit people? For example, having more open days, sort of reaching out in communities. And my last question is, who determines what awareness months days take place? For example, I don't think we did anything for Islamophobia Awareness Month, which was in November. There's International Women's Day coming up in 2 weeks' time. What kind of plans have we in place for that? Yep, and that's about it, really. Thank you.
Thank you. Who would like to answer?
Thank you, Councillor. I will get back to you on the email and send that across with the breakdown. So, following on from your questions, page 79, so Diverse City Development Trust, they're also under Faith Star, so that is Faith Star's new charity that they've recently established. The different diverse ethnic minority groups that we work with, I can send you a list via to your email, but there are quite a lot, but we are aware of the new groups coming in, so hopefully soon I'll be starting a new mapping exercise to kind of map across the city what groups we have and how we can further engage with them more effectively and long term.
On the recruitment side, we, on the 28th of March, are launching a new recruitment module. So the process of recruiting is going to become much easier. It's going to be anonymised. So as people go through the process, there's more chance of colleagues being appointed from a wider range of diversity backgrounds, because the evidence is there, especially for BAME. As you go through the process, there's less chance of us appointing a BAME colleague because of the methodology that we use. It's very traditional. It's you put an application form in, it's shortlisted, you're interviewed, you get the job, you don't get the job. We're becoming much more creative. We're looking at using assessment centres, looking at psychometric tests. How we recruit in a very different way. The attraction methodology that you referred to is exactly where we're heading. So using LACS, using careers fair, we've got a careers fair booked here in the town hall coming up. We're looking at national careers fairs, and we're looking at our our visibility on those stands to be as diverse as possible so that we can then attract in those hard to reach areas, as in the posts that we can't fill, but from communities that are underrepresented.
Just on, thank Councillor Naz, on the last question about the calendar of events, and obviously there's a huge number of kind of commemorative events, and we do absolutely everything we can to kind of support organisations. We have to, obviously within the resource we have, some events take a lot of capacity and a lot of focus. So you'll have recently seen the Holocaust Memorial Day, which obviously historically has taken place in the Winter Garden. It's been a huge recognition and commemoration event for the city. Things like International Women's Day, actually, just interestingly, before we were sat in the ante room waiting, we were doing some planning work on that as it happens. There's currently a piece of work underway to look at how we collaborate across the VCF sector and community organisations to ensure we have a really powerful and effective approach to all the most significant events we've got. Obviously, we don't have the resource to support absolutely everything, so there always has to be some prioritisation. But that doesn't mean to say we shouldn't be recognising and celebrating those events in different ways. So we'll always try and work with the community sector on every element of it to try and support it and promote events in the city. But the scale of kind of support and how much resource we put in is different depending on what it is, really.
Councillor Naz wants to come back in.
That's fine. I mean, the reason I said Islamophobia Awareness Month is it's a month. So even if you did something online, if the online present, it'd be very important that you did recognise that. Just another question: do you do grants and things like that go out to community groups so they can celebrate? Because I represent one of the most diverse wards in Sheffield, the Darnall and Tinsley ward. And most of the groups I work with have never ever had any engagement with our Equalities team. I think the perception out there is there's a few favoured groups that the Equalities team seems to work with and not engage with the vast majority of groups that exist in our communities.
Yeah, I mean, it's fair to say we give Equality and Fairness grants in relation to the Equality Partnership, and those went out to at the time, the 6 organisations that got the grant funding, but that isn't all the organisations that we work with. I think in the report we have said this year, or the last 2 years with COVID, we have struggled with capacity, because for a period of time it was just me, and then later obviously Adi and Elena in the team were recruited, so we have had some capacity issues. But that, I think Adi referred to it earlier, one of her projects is the mapping and going out there and meeting community organisations, because we are very well aware that that is something that in the last 2 years we haven't done as much of as we would have liked to, and it has been capacity.
I think it's a fair question, Councillor. I think there's from looking, obviously we haven't got the Risk Quality Commission report to point to right now, but looking and hearing from some of the hearings, some of the evidence that was received, some of that story comes out a little bit. I think we know, not just in terms of equality organisations, we have to think about how we best work with the VCF sector. It's actually in the one-year plan to talk about how we best commission and support the VCF sector and actually collaborate and work together. And that includes obviously some of the bigger infrastructure organisations in the city, but also reaching some of those smaller community organisations who play a vital role in all our communities, really. And obviously we have finite resource. The question is how we best use that resource to kind of support communities. So that was referenced in the one-year plan a little bit, and it is a piece of work we know we need to do as well. So.
Okay, thank you. Councillor Aries is next.
Sorry. Thank you for the report. And it's again, it's on the issue of recruitment retention within. It's my favourite subject, actually. within this organisation's workforce, and I'm becoming increasingly aware that okay, my portfolio covers health and social care, where it is a publicly acknowledged issue. But my antenna tells me that it is not just an issue for health and social care, it's across the public sector as a whole. So the issue of retention, I'm asking this in various quarters now as to what degree is progression planning incorporated in the council's recruitment strategies in order to address, I mean, looking at page 100, at the senior officer level, chief officer trends, and as elsewhere, I mean, I see that disabled employees, for example, are down, you know, but at that senior officer level, you know, in order to retain people, it's all right, you know, once you've got over the step of recruiting people, in order to retain the people, there needs to be some sort of incentive in terms of progression that they will be able to reach an accepted level. You know, that's something. Otherwise, they're going to leave, aren't they? You know, get jobs in Amazon or whatever. You know, as has happened in the social care sector. I just wonder how we incorporate that within our employment and retention strategies.
If I may, Councillor, just to pick up on the social care element, I think over the last couple of years, the turnover there has increased significantly in the context of the pandemic and what that has brought in the sense of the need for those roles. So we have seen a real spike in the level of vacancies that we've got in that particular field. And we're no different, unfortunately, to most other local authorities who are having exactly the same problem, because you can go and work in any supermarket and earn more and have less responsibility and less impact on the type of role that you are doing for yourself and for the person that you're caring for. So we've got a lot to do to really think about how do we address that turnover, how do we attract people into those professions, how do we grow our own workforce. We've got a lot of people that join the organisation at the start of their career, and you're absolutely right, we don't career plan how they're then going to develop throughout that space, become qualified social workers, move into management, move around the organisation. It's part of the EDI workforce plan that we've developed that's aligned to the one-year plan. It focuses on specific interventions that will support targeted protected characteristics along with generalised development for everybody. We don't access the levy, the apprentice levy, in the way that we should be. We can use that for our existing workforce and give people professional qualifications as well as practical skills through them shadowing and going out and working with other people that are in their service to develop those skills. So it is a key area. We must stop the turnover that we have got, and we must retain the talent and give people that opportunity to grow, alongside bringing in new talent, because we do need new people as well that will bring a different diversity and a different skill set that we don't necessarily already have.
Okay. Councillor Alton.
Thank you, Chair. Thank you for the report. I've got two questions. I suppose the first one is, obviously there's a lot of information in the report about the demographics of the city, about all the groups doing lots of work and so on. And I appreciate you said it's kind of the monitoring data wasn't great at the beginning. But do you have a sense? I mean, I think we all recognise there's prejudice and discrimination going on about us. I'm obviously going to be less aware of that than people directly on the receiving end of it. But do we have a sense, if you can't quantify it, just a sense of it, how bad it is, and is it getting worse or is it getting better? Is that a fair question?
I think it's a really fair question, and I think whenever you raise the profile of something, you are going to see the level of people having the confidence to raise their concerns increase. This happened in the NHS. They introduced zero tolerance of attacks in A&E. All of a sudden you saw the reporting meant that it shot up to levels they'd never seen. The organisation at the moment has really raised its profile and its commitment to the EDI agenda. And as a result of that, I do think when we come back this time next year, you will see a real spike in some of the casework data, for example. You'll see colleagues here reporting data on the hate reporting, we should see a spike in that. We should expect that, because as people then have the confidence to be able to raise it, it's then what do we do as a result of that? So it's okay having the spike, we need to have the tools and the systems and the processes behind us to then be able to deal and support with those people and deal with the issues that they're raising. So I just need to plant that seed that you're right, the data's not 100% accurate now, but we'll get better data, but it is going to give you a position that you might not be comfortable seeing.
Thank you. Yeah, thank you for that. I mean, yeah, okay. I look forward to that next year's report. Maybe I shouldn't. So my second question, and I hesitate to bring this up, but we are witnessing what is, to my mind, and others may disagree, to my mind, an organised attempt to push back against civil rights for trans people in the name of protecting people in another protected characteristic category. Now, I didn't see anything on this in the report. Is that a good sign that it doesn't, that hasn't, it's, you know, it's the culture wars and so on, but it's not actually affecting the front line of work on equalities? Or is it a bad sign that, you know, you're keeping your heads down? I mean, is there a reason for that? And is it impacting, I suppose, the work that you're doing?
It did impact, obviously, with the Equality Partnership a couple of years ago, in terms of the Equality Partnership was actually closed down for a period of time because of issues. We have tried to work through this in line with what the Equality Act says and the law, and then how that relates to all protected characteristics, because that is something we do have to bear in mind. But it is something that comes up, and it is something that we talk about quite frequently with different groups, and we are trying as an organisation to stay legal, because we are looking all the time, obviously, and I don't want to get into a kind of a debate about it, but the Equality and Human Rights Commission are issuing different guidance to how they issued it before, and we have to stay, I speak to legal colleagues quite a lot on staying in relation to the Equality Act, staying in the middle as much as we can, while at the same time supporting, obviously, trans colleagues within the organisation and externally within the organisation. But it is fair to say that there is a conflict of rights going on everywhere within Britain, and Sheffield is no different in relation to that, and we do see that appearing. But it hasn't been a huge piece of work this year. It was more kind of the year before, whereas that came to prominence.
Yeah, I just want to say, in terms of the data, I did the data report. The declaration rate for trans colleagues is very, very low, and we don't know if that's about the fact that we actually have very few trans colleagues, or whether they feel able to declare. So we need to do some more work on that. We're updating the workforce census actually at the moment, so we can collect better data around our trans and non-binary colleagues. So this guidance is sort of in line with modern definitions. So we're starting to look about non-binary definitions, trans definitions, including trans women and men in self-declaration for sex and stuff like that. So when we launch that, we'll probably be doing some promotion to raise awareness of trans issues, because as Adele says, it is our duty under the Equality Act to make sure that we are monitoring our trans colleagues and making sure they're treated fairly.
Thank you. Can I just pick up on a point that Councillor Otten made about, you said they were expecting more reporting. Are we ready for that? Are we geared up for that? Have we got people trained in guidance or policy ready for that?
No, but we're working on it, is the honest answer. We are reviewing all of our policies. We've got 89 policies, would you believe, across the organisation. We're looking to streamline them as part of a project, put some targeted support around. We are talking to each of our networks around the roles that they will play in supporting this. I was here at the Audit Committee a few weeks ago where we were talking about contact officers and reintroducing contact officers in line with the whistleblowing policy. That will be another route in which we can then support people that raise issues. But the honest answer is no, we're not ready. We haven't been ready over the last 12 months whilst we've been a very, very small team, in the same way that the equality team has been very small. Thankfully, there's some investment coming in, and we're going to be looking at putting some more resources around this work because we have been under-resourced for quite some time to be able to deal with these issues.
Thank you. Councillor Argentio.
Thank you, Chair, and thank you very much for putting the report together, Adiola, and for everybody for presenting it. I didn't write notes next to the exact pages, so I'm not going to go into that, but a few observations. Obviously, we're using an old census, so I thank you for mentioning the fact that the numbers are going to be completely different just in a few months' time. Thank you for, there is a mention of intersectionality, and I was wondering whether we could capture that data somehow, because, we all, in a way, intersectional, aren't we? We all have different experiences, different backgrounds, but being a woman, being non-British white, or am I British white? And that's a question for you. I have British citizenship. I think I'm white, but what am I? Because when I have to tick that box, I'm always like, which one is my box, kind of thing. And these are things that happens with lots of people. And, who is Asian? I mean, Asian has got most of the Earth population, and we have one label, but we separate white British, white Irish, other white. It really makes no sense to me, and I'm lucky, if you want, but it's really, having labels is a really difficult thing, and putting yourself in a particular box is very difficult. So I think it would be interesting to capture the intersectionality. How many people are women and disabled? How many people are, Black, Asian, and disabled? How many people are Afro-Caribbean disabled and trans and whatever else we might want to declare? The other thing is about accessibility and equality of kind of access for people. And I've been a councillor for nearly 3 years, and for the whole time I've been on the Audit and Standards Committee. And I think it was in the summer when I was first elected, it was either the summer or the autumn, we brought up the website, and we've had people coming in and saying that the website would be updated and would be totally accessible. And I'm really glad that we are working with accessible. And however, our website is still not accessible to people with disability, and it's 3 years later than it was raised in a meeting. I think I raised it. And I was in a meeting this week with another satellite website that the council is putting together that is not accessible to visually impaired people. So the pictures are not going to be captioned, and that is not because people are not aware of it, it's because they haven't got the resources. If there are 2 people working on a really important project, and they've got a timescale and they have no funding, how can we then make it equal and accessible to every citizen in Sheffield, whatever their learning disability or visual disability or whatever else? So it's about that embedding these policies. It's brilliant that we are making it such a prominent feature of how the council works, but we have to put our money where our mouths are. So we cannot expect things to happen just because we're doing the right thing in terms of policies. We have to do the right things in terms of investment. And also in terms of the HR side, I would like to see more women who are not white in the highest ranks of the council. I would like to see more non-white people in the highest rank of the council. And I'm hoping that that is going to happen, but I want to know what happens when people are going up the ladder in terms of their grading, and how fair it is for people who are from non-white backgrounds to get into the highest, employment grades. So I think we maybe analysing the data of the people just below their threshold and see how we support our workers so that they can, progress in their career. Because the more people feel that they are represented, as we well know, the more we will get people applying for jobs. I am a bit concerned about the amount of pressure that is being put on the LACs at the moment, and it's like the LACs is the solution to everything at the moment. And in the LACs, which is the central one, there is a very diverse LAC, like every other. We are struggling, and I think this is across the city, we're struggling to engage with the minoritized communities because we are not good at communicating with them. It's not that they're not good at participating, it's that we don't know how to communicate with them and reach them. So I'm just a bit conscious of the fact that everything at the moment is like, it's going to get better because of the LACs. The data we have this early on in the central LAC, and I think it's across the city, is that most of the people that are responding are white. That in our particular LAC, most of the people who are responding are homeowners. 74% of the people are engaged. So that's obviously not representative at all of that particular LAC. So how are we going to ensure that we have the tools to engage with the people that most need us?
I'll do the internal stuff first, if that's okay, Councillor. So the intersectionality and the intrasectionality. So you're absolutely right. Very few people have one protected characteristic. They have multiple protected characteristics. And this year, Rosie, who's done the workforce element of this report, has kept it in the context of how we've always reported it in the sense of the data. Next year, the ambition is that we will be looking at the vast array of intersectionality aspects, so identifying where we've got black women with a disability, white man with caring need, etc., etc. The intrasectionality of breaking down those big buckets that we put people into. You use the word label. I try to avoid using that word, but I agree that people get given that label, they're put in this bucket and they're BAME. What does that actually mean? And there are so many different things within there. So again, we want to look at that. And I've had various conversations with our internal Race Safe Space group, which is the network for colleagues that have a BAME background and their allies. And they want to help us to focus on breaking down the different things that we can do to support colleagues that are Black Somali or are Asian, and the various different aspects of the different Asian categories, so and where people have historically come from and their ethnicity. So there's a lot of work we will be doing on that this time next year. If you're not seeing that, then please do challenge us on that, because that's our ambition, is to look at all of that. The progression of non-white women, that's our ambition as well, but it's against all protected characteristics. So again, going back to that intersectionality, if we look at the other key aspects such as disability, we don't have disabled senior leaders that are visible, that are the role models, in the same way that we don't have non-white women that are leaders, etc. There's lots of things that we need to do in that space. We need to create a level playing field for people to be able to have the confidence that they can go through the process and compete. I've had a number of one-to-one conversations coming back to us, raising the profile and giving people the confidence to speak to us about some of the barriers that they've faced, some of the issues that they've faced. And a lot of this now does come down to confidence, and people have tried repeatedly, not got where they wanted to get, and it's how do we understand what those barriers were that were put in their way. Is it their own confidence now? What support mechanisms? How ready are they? they've lost their confidence and therefore they've moved further away from being ready for that promotion. So targeted interventions that would really support individuals to build their confidence, know how to go through a competitive process on a level playing field is all part of that plan that we have got for the activities. We need to also think about the leadership here and the education of our recruiters. And it will be mandatory for everybody that is on a panel to have done our equality, diversity and inclusion training, and moving forward they will have also had to have done our recruitment and selection training, so things like unconscious bias, things like positive action, things like looking at what the workforce profile looks like and then targeting people that are not represented within that particular group of posts, that particular vacancy, that service. That will all help us to think about how we then encourage people from underrepresented groups to apply and support them to do so. I think they were the internal things.
In terms of the access work, you're absolutely right. We took a report on a couple of weeks ago, actually, in terms of our website accessibility and the standards that we need to go through. And there was a process and a presentation to the board which said where we're failing to meet the standards at the moment, and that is across quite a lot of our website, because any existing content, any new content coming out on has to meet the standard, but the existing content that is on there doesn't necessarily meet the standard, and that's one of the problems we're having. And we're working with our digital services teams, comms team, and with colleagues across the council to try and improve that. But it is, you're absolutely right, it is a huge area, which is why we took the report to the leadership team to say that we need to do further work on that. And we said that we would have a group with visually impaired colleagues across the council for them to input into it as well, to make sure that we're getting, and with people from the city, to be able to say what content on there at the moment isn't accessible. And we actually obviously tried to make sure in terms of things like the last year, the report, the data report that we had wasn't accessible. This year we've made sure that it's accessible, and it's something that we'll be taking through. We've said each portfolio leadership team to have a strategy for them to make sure that they're addressing this through all of obviously each portfolio. In terms of obviously how we categorise, we normally use the ONS definitions. So something obviously like anything that comes under Black, Asian, minority, ethnic also includes the white other category, because that is what is in the census definitions. So white British is the only thing that kind of goes into that white British, and everything else goes into the other big categories. But that is why we need to get better at disaggregating the data, like Clara said, in terms of the internal staff data. We also need to do that and make sure we've got that with the new census data that's coming up. Adi, do you want to say something about mapping?
Yeah. Just coming back to your point that you made about the engagement in terms of the LACs and the central LACs, I think it's actually quite interesting, the point that you've made, and I think there needs to be some work around training officers in post how to actually engage with communities out there, because it's one thing having it in your job role, but then actually doing it in real life is a complete different thing. So thanks for raising that point. And secondly, in terms of retention and also progression, we need to look internally and look at what is the council culture right now for employees. So I think a general review or maybe consultation might be something that could actually give us some more data and actually capture what people are, like how people are feeling. And I think that's something that we need to look at.
Yes. Laurie just indicated first, and then you can come back in.
I was just going to come back to some of you, because you made a number of points there, and they're really quite useful to hear as well. On the broader points, so firstly about the sort of embedding equalities, kind of equality, diversity, inclusion in the things we're doing. Councillor Dale was certainly there, and Councillor Levery as well. We had a really good, so you know, obviously the transition to the committee system is a massive piece of work that's happening right now. We had a really good conversation this week about how we've got a critical opportunity really in terms of significant governance shift in how we do our business in Sheffield City Council and how we make sure we embed equality, diversity and inclusion in that model. And that comes at a member level in terms of the decision making we make to make sure that we're challenging each other, to ensure that EIAs are there, there's proper thinking and proper engagement and consultation gone into decisions we're making, but also that then acting as an expectation on officers that those skills and knowledge and expertise exist, so that when you're in the future years to come, next year, when you're on committees or you're on the Strategy and Resources Committee or however that kind of pans out, you should be there to be able to feel confident and capable to challenge officers to make sure that equality and diversity thinking is brought into the report, so that the decisions you're making are fully approved in that sort of space. The second bit on the lax and the sort of wider engagement point, it's sort of tangentially connected to that as well, about that's been obviously one of the big drivers in terms of the committee system work about how we better connect ourselves. In the one-year plan, we said we wanted to be a council that was more in and of our communities, and that will definitely move into how we move into a corporate plan for the next 3 to 5 years as well. One of the things we're starting to work on as a result of the committee's transition work with an organisation called Involve is trying to help get to something that looks like a set of engagement framework for the city, which is co-designed with communities and with the voluntary sector as well, to start thinking actually how do we do this better and how do we get that training right, so we've got skills and capacity, not lacking just one team with the expertise around engagement, but also that's built into our portfolios as well, so that whatever activity we're undertaking, officers should be confident in that space to know how to try and connect to communities. And it's not always through us. We have to use appropriate mechanisms to make sure that we can connect to the people that can connect to different people in the city, and that's the trick, really, I think. So, but yeah, absolutely brilliant questions, because it's exactly in that space where a lot of the work is focusing right now. So thank you.
Thank you. Thank you. I really appreciate the answers, all of them, and carry on. I know it's a long-term thing. It's a shifting culture in a way, isn't it? So it's under the ONS definition, I'm a BAME, but can you imagine me turning up to a group and just, as a white woman, telling, for example, a group of non-white women, and just demand. So that's why I asked that question, because it's one of the things that is complicated about it.
Okay, I think that was just a comment, wasn't it? Thank you. Next, we've got Councillor Leveray.
Thanks, Chair. Just 2 or 3 comments. I mean, this is a really important report. I read it every year when I get it and plough through the stats, because I'm a stat man. But a lot of people aren't stat men, and there's a lot of stats in it. So I'd just like to comment, first of all, about structure. It would really benefit from an executive summary, identifying the successes and the challenges that have happened in the previous 12 months, so people can then go into the report and read the areas that are interested in, without having to go through and find it. Secondly, separating out detailed stats within the body does help with the read. So people can read the key things that are in there and then refer to the appendices where the stats are, so they can get to the stats if they need to. So it's just, that helps access an easy read. The second point is, now I've gone on about this at scrutiny committees for years, is the timing, because we're almost a year on from when this report is reporting, and really we would expect within the first 6 months that a report as important as this should come before and be published, because the data becomes out of date. So that's my second point. My third point is about pathways into education, training and employment and apprenticeships. Now I do speak a lot and look carefully at apprenticeships. The apprenticeships in September last year went through the floor, and particularly, and the most revealing statistics that came out of this were that where schools were in the better off areas, you didn't see any change to needs. Because kids who would have gone into apprenticeships have gone on to further education anyway. Where schools are in the poorer areas and the BAME communities, the NEET numbers went up because those children did not go on to further education and they became NEET. And that's the fact that the apprenticeship options were not available due to the current circumstances across the city in terms of small employers being able to offer apprenticeships. So one thing I would like you to consider is that as well as the partners you've identified, you also identify the Chamber of Commerce, who are key players in dealing with the apprenticeship opportunities, so that we can firmly understand what the challenges are and what needs to be done. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you. Does anybody want to comment on that? Adele?
Yeah. In terms of the report and the timing of it, we absolutely agree, and I know that we did schedule this in before, well before Christmas to start with. However, we were talking outside, and as long as we've got the statistics from the census, then we were looking at bringing this report in the autumn of this year. Addy's already started the new report to make sure it is more timely, because we are aware, obviously, that is an issue. And in terms of the structure, obviously, as Addy was saying earlier, we are looking at the structure. We do know it's a long report. There is a little bit of an overview in there, and when we put it on the website, and we're looking at actually having it designed so it is designed better and it will be more accessible to people and it will look better, and we will have that executive summary with that to go on the website, because we do know that most people will choose to read the executive summary and not the full report. And also maybe think about, in terms of the structure, having some of the data as an appendix as well. So we'll take that away and have a look at the structure like we said that we were going to. And then in terms of other data, we will obviously go to the Chamber of Commerce, and we do know there were a lot of issues around apprenticeships, and that is, I don't know whether you want to pick up on that internally.
Yeah, I mean, I can pick on it externally and internally to some extent. I agree with the Chamber of Commerce, but other key organisations that have a body mass like we have need to be role modelling, getting apprenticeships back up and running very, very quickly. It's only through that then small organisations will feel that they're missing out. We've started to think about how we can work with some of the core organisations across the city. We're looking at apprenticeships that aren't necessarily just for us to benefit, especially in the health and care sector, working with the NHS to look at how we can support each other. At the end of the day, we're here for the service users. Also, that would impact on the young people that may then want to explore apprenticeships. You're absolutely right. I think there's a whole range of reasons why we've got generically now a lot more qualified people applying for apprenticeships than those that have not done as well in school. It could be tuition fees for universities. People are choosing to do apprenticeships, and therefore what we're looking at is some targeted apprenticeships where we're specifically taking that positive action to encourage people that may need a bit more help to become work ready through supported internships, supported apprenticeships, and we're looking at some apprenticeships that would enable us to bring more disabled colleagues into the workplace, where we have things like job coaches, because again they tend to be the lost community where they leave school and then there isn't very much for them. Doesn't mean to say that we might be always their employer. We might start them on that journey, but we've just, for example, had an apprentice that we've supported, but they're now working in a community organisation, and that's the right thing for them. So absolutely agree, there's a lot we need to do in this space on apprenticeships, and we've got some great plans.
Thank you. Can I just add that it isn't entirely your fault of the timing of this report. We as a committee had to move it on a couple of times because of call-ins and various things. Is that correct? Yeah. So it is not entirely your fault. Thank you. Councillor Lever, is that all yours? Thank you. Councillor Dale?
Thank you, Chair. I wasn't going to speak, but I've been sat and I'm trying to be mindful of how I say what I'm going to say, because I don't mean to be critical in any way. However, having been on the Commission, I've got some other information that I'm privy to. And Adiola hit the nail on the head for me, which meant that I needed to speak on this. When we've just spoken about progression within the council, it felt like it was very much put back on the people who are not progressing as their problem. So it was sort of said they are not skilled, they are not confident, and I feel that that needs to change. And Adiola, I'm glad that you said that we are looking at the sorts of what I'm trying to get at is, what is it we're going to do about that in concrete? So what will that look like? What do we intend our outcomes to be, and what will it look like when we've completed that? Because there needs to be a shift in language and a shift in culture, because if people are constantly being talked about as not confident, not skilled enough, then they won't come forward. And so I'm not trying to be critical, I'm just mindful of people watching this. It kind of is a bit of a stereotypical kind of language. So if we can just give me I have looked on page, I've just flicked over from there, around the management plan. But by the end of, what is the time scale? How are we planning on building up? Am I making any sense to anybody whatsoever? Yeah, thank you.
So I apologise if that's how it came across, and certainly to our colleagues that are in those groups where they are struggling to progress. I was referring to the people that had come and spoken to me as on a one-to-one basis. So I've had a number of one-to-one conversations with people that have asked for them to share their barriers. So I just wanted to reiterate, it's in that context that I'm talking about people not having confidence, and I don't want you to think that's a generalisation. Absolutely not. We've got a lot of very capable people from a diverse background who are ready to progress, but the barriers are being put in their way in many different ways. You want tangible activity? Absolutely. We've got our middle management leadership programme that we are relaunching. It's something that we started just before the pandemic. It was paused. There are activities as part of that will enable people from a whole breadth of backgrounds, a whole breadth of skills to come together to work collectively on their leadership skills, their abilities, develop those over time and share their experiences. And then that would think about, how to have difficult conversations. What you tend to find with learning and development is it's not a course that you go on, it's a whole series of different interactions that you have. It could be shadowing, it could be an action learning set. So that programme will give an infrastructure that will enable people to engage over a period of time and then grow in that space and hopefully then compete in a much more positive way. I can't put a timeline in the sense of when I expect to see different statistics for you. Unfortunately, the other local authorities that we've talked to recently, it's taken 10 years to transform some of this data. This is not something that will transform overnight. It does come back to exactly what Addy was saying. This is all about the culture. This is about our management capability, how we value EDI, as much as we've got a diverse population and a diverse community of employees that we need to support and ensure that they're able to progress.
Okay. All right, Councillor Dale? Yep, Councillor Rooney?
Thanks, Chair. It's going to repeat in some ways the things that have already been said. I do think that every now and again you do have to sort of have a look at the way you present in your reports and revamp them or change them, and maybe even have several different versions of it depending on who you want to talk to. Because there are some people like Mike over there who love statistics and graphs and pie charts and all that sort of thing. I hate them. And I actually got Stephen Betts from Learn Sheffield to change the way he wrote his reports because I couldn't get my head around what he was doing. So it's just a suggestion. But I think the main point is I believe, a follow-up from Councillor Dales, which is, I'm sure there are teams like yourself beavering away in various organisations in this city, the big players and some of the smaller players as well, doing exactly the same sort of statistical analysis as you are. And I'm not sure do you ever talk to each other round the table? And I personally, when you produce a report like this, with it, or at some time close to its production, there should be another one that says, we've done that, and this is what we're going to do to put these things right. And I think, to me, that at this moment in time is the bit I can't see. And I can't actually see the relationship between the issues that are in here and the ones that were uncovered by the Equalities Commission and a plan to stick them all together and do something about it. And that's the thing that I think is missing.
Thanks, Councillor Rooney. I think that's all fair comment. I think actually one of the things we always wrestle with is about the sort of the statutory duty to provide the report for one and show that level of analysis. But also then, because what I take from it when Adi works so hard on it really is it tells that story about where the city's at, and also combined with the workforce data tells where the organisation's at as well, and it sets out those challenges. So I think actually linking to Councillor Labour's point as well about there's like a developing narrative here which probably builds on the summary that was in your packs as well, but starts to bring together that says here's what the story is for Sheffield at the minute in terms of the City Council, but also the developing picture of the city. That'll certainly be enriched by the next level of census data that comes out, particularly because for the first time they ask things like sexuality questions in there, so it'll enhance our own knowledge around that. But definitely, and again, linking to Councillor Dale's point, one of the critical steps here is about, on the back of the Race Equality Commission, when we get the recommendations, that not all that won't all just be about race either. There's intersectionality and all that. What are we going to do as an organisation to kind of commit to addressing the things that are raised in this report? And Claire's just talked in quite a lot of detail really about some of the workforce things we're trying to do. There's lots in train. What maybe we don't do as well as we should is maybe provide that to you as members to give you that confidence that stuff's happening. Because I could probably sit here for an hour and talk about some of the fantastic things I've seen my teams and the HR teams do this year, and it's front and centre in our minds right now. The second part of that is that, and it's something we're going to have to wrestle with and work through as a city as well, that things like the type of report you've seen here, we do share that, we do work with other organisations, but things like the Race Equality Commission are not about the council. It's about the city and culturally what we need to do and what we need to change. So there's something in that about how we work with the anchor institutions, and by that I mean like the big public sector organisations, the universities, to say this is a shared challenge because we can't address this level of inequality that people experience, not just in terms of race, but in terms of gender, in terms of LGBT plus. So it's sort of, there's a shared momentum that's being developed here. The question is, how do we collectively own actions responsible and are responsible for that, and then demonstrate to the city that things are changing as well? That's going to be the massive challenge, because with respect, the census data will just raise the bar because we know the population's shifted significantly, so we'll probably look less diverse as an organisation potentially. We might look less representative, and that's going to be our challenge we have to take on. Right. Is that broad the answer? No.
Can I just add, Councillor Rooney, that we do meet on a regular basis with other equality and diversity leads across the city. So we have a team meeting with equality leads with health, and also with the universities and colleges and others across the region as well. We have a regional meeting coming up next week, I think. So we try and do this. So we're not all kind of doing the same thing. So we're working together and trying not to duplicate what we're doing.
Could I suggest that you tell us about that every
yes,
now and again?
we will. Sorry, yeah, we'll definitely put that in. Thank you.
Just to follow up on that, telling you about it is quite important in all this, because we also need to probably work out where this comes in future years, and in terms of where that lands in a new system, because with respect, this won't be the committee for it really, so because it won't exist. So, but we do need to do that. Feels corporately as an organisation, it's got to be right in the kind of right in the centre of the committee system work. So we'll work that out.
It's also, I'm sorry about this, Chair. It's also important because it might actually influence council spend and political priorities as well. The message that you bring.
Absolutely. Thanks, Councillor Rooney. Oh, Councillor Phipps, you've got to just indicate.
Okay, sorry. Can I just add on the back of Councillor Rooney's comment? I think it goes one step further, please, and this is a kind of plea. What can you do to help us? So we can give you the data, we can tell you which organisation we're working for, but if we're going to attract from the communities that you're representing, we need your support. So I think it works both ways. We can tell you what we want to do, we can ask for your support.
please help. Sorry. I think that, just picking up on that point, that when we go into to committees, it's all new territory, and I'm sure that the committees should use you, because you hold a lot of information here, and it would benefit them to use your team, and I wouldn't, like you were saying, Laurie, that about coming to one place. I think it might be good that you not necessarily bring all your report to every committee, but parts of your report to be used in various committees, say education, transport, etc.
Thank you, Chair. Just to come back on that, I think that's exactly right, and I think that Councillor Dale and Councillor Levery will probably be well versed in this already, that in the model that's developing, the proposals that are developing that will come to full council at the end of March, that's the sort of model there is there about how we ensure we've almost got like a team around the committee from an officer side, so that it's not just reliant on members asking for that information and hoping that we can find it. It's meant to be making sure you've got the right policy capacity around it, the right finance, legal, HR advice around those committees to make sure that we're ready and set to support that decision-making framework, and having good data intelligence, business intelligence alongside the decision-making, and that includes equalities information, is going to be fundamental, because it's going to be very different in terms of that quite a dispersed decision-making model compared to where we are now. So.
Absolutely, and it will come to a well-run council, as quoting Councillor Levery again from last month, that will lead to a well-run council. Thank you. Councillor Phipps.
Thank you, Chair. Thank you for the report. It's a massive piece of work, so thank you for doing that. Just coming back, kind of leading on from a question Joe raised earlier, I'm just thinking, looking at the report, I saw the Stonewall Diversity Scheme, Diversity Champion Scheme is like mentioned, there's like a picture of it, but we weren't actually in it for this one, as far as I'm aware. So I'm just thinking, when decisions are taken to leave or join schemes like this, how are staff consulted, in particular the staff from the groups that are affected? So will LGBT plus staff be consulted over whether we will rejoin the scheme in the future, or any considerations around that? Just because I've had concerned residents and staff contacting me around the council leaving the scheme, and it was good to see organisations recently being recognised, like social media posts, over their work in being LGBT plus inclusive as part of the Stonewall Diversity Champion Scheme, although unfortunately we weren't part of that this year.
In terms of the decisions, at the moment the decision went to the Strategic Equality Board and looked at obviously a variety of reasons, and as you know, one of the reasons in terms of Stonewall was around staff capacity and capacity to do all of the different work that we're doing, and the amount of time that went into doing an index like that. And it's something I think that we have to look at across the board for protected characteristics, because what you do on one characteristic, if you're spending, obviously as that is 300 or more hours of, generally Michelle and I sitting here doing kind of the work on that, that then also means that's 300 hours that you're not spending on other things. So it's always a balance, and that is really, really difficult. So I do think we need to listen to all different groups, but it's not just necessarily one group, because it is balancing things out.
It's a slight deviation, if I may, but disability confident. We have got a disability confident working group, which is a representative group from across the organisation that meets on a monthly basis, and they are working towards our assessing where we are against disability confident. We've currently got disability confident level 2. We spent a lot of time and effort getting that, but unfortunately didn't change some of the fundamental things that would enable us to get it again straight away. We put sticking plasters in to meet the standard rather than changing fundamentally what we do, which then means you can then get reaccreditation every time. So if we had an LGBTQ plus network, which unfortunately we don't have, we could obviously work with that group to then reconsider Stonewall, because then we have that broader capacity, we have the better expertise to be able to look at what opportunities there are for us to evidence against the different standards. being a non-LGBTQ plus member, a heterosexual woman, I don't know what some of those things are that would impact that. It's much better if it's done bottom up. But we just need one of those, we need a group that's representative of that community that would be able to help us and take some of the pressure off of the people that you're seeing here who don't have the capacity to do that.
Thank you. I think that's all the members' questions being answered. I'd like to thank you, but just add a couple of points. There's lots of good news in this report that we haven't been able to cover today, and I'd like to highlight it and say thank you to you for how you communicated during COVID and got to individuals through exceptional circumstances, and that's been shown with the mental health and videos and things that I've read that you did, which, I'd like to put on record and say thank you for that, because, it was thinking outside the box, which is what you did. Councillor Otten, do you want to add a point to this?
Thank you, Chair. Yes, I agree with what you say. I would like to think of a recommendation for us to take away from just discussion we've had, and that it strikes me that the question of EDI training for members of the Senior Officer Appointment Committee, having served on it this year and not had any additional specific training, I think beyond, in EDI terms, beyond the training I got 11 years ago during induction, it strikes me is that is an omission, and that should be a recommendation from this committee that is provided, and perhaps even mandated for service. Councillor Phipps is giggling for reasons, private joke between us, mandated for service on that committee, because I could start talking about my experience on it, but I don't think I should. But I think that would be a good idea for something for us to recommend.
Councillor Dale?
Thank you. Just being mindful of when we commission pieces of work through the council, quite often anybody who's commissioned needs to have evidence that they've done EDI training, and I think it's important that all staff and all members fulfil that commitment to do because it's an online EDI course, and I think extending on what you said, Councillor Otten, I think that should be part of the process moving forward. It's part of a training package for all staff and all elected members.
It's mandatory now that all staff have to complete 2 modules, all managers have to complete 3 modules. I'm not going to sit here and say that's what people are doing. We've got a 45% compliance rate at the moment for the 2 general courses, 42% for the manager course. That's a significant increase in where we were last year, where we were averaging around 18%. So we've done a lot of communications internally around increasing that, but we've got a lot more work to go, hence we're blocking people from being on recruitment and selection panels if you have not done the training. So, Councillor Otten, brilliant. Yes, please, if you are happy to recommend that, can I push a bit, please, though, and say, can all members look at doing that, please, not just those on that committee? It's 3 hours of your life of an online training, 3 different modules, an hour each. They're not the best, but they will give you what you need to be able to think about, and we're looking at how we can develop them and make them more SCC, make them, personalise them to us. They're bought off the shelf, but they will give you exactly what you're looking for.
Thank you. I agree. As new councillors, especially new councillors, I think that we should recommend that they do that training. Old councillors, we can ask them, but Councillor Dale.
Sorry, I'm going to add on to that though. I think there should be refreshers for existing councillors.
That's what I was getting on to. Yeah, as old, old councillors, we should make it our duty to do that. And we can only ask older, experienced councillors if they will take part.
Would you use the expression longer serving councillors?
Sorry. Sorry, take the old about. Going back to the beginning, as Addy quoted about using videos, I think that's a really good idea, and we could recommend that. And I've noted the leader doing 2-minute videos that get really, really good responses on social media. Not always the right responses, but we get the feeling of what people are thinking out there, and I think that is the way forward. Social media is the way to get to the public quicker than what we've done in the past, I think. So I'm sure the committee would agree with me as another part of our recommendation. But anyway, thank you very much for coming along and giving your time up today. It's an excellent report that I'm sure took hours and hours and hours of your time, and we really appreciate, because it is thorough and detailed, and you've explained some of it today to us. So can I say thank you very much for attending again. And that leads us to item 9, which, yes, because we moved up item 8, didn't we? So item 9 is just to say the date of the next meeting is the 17th of March, and we just have one thing left on the agenda, which was community safety, if I'm right. So that's we'll be back to 1 o'clock on the 17th of March. Thank you, members, for attending today.
Chair, I've just had a thought. Did we pass a recommendation that Councillor Dawn-Dale suggested? Or just thinking we didn't vote on it or anything. If we did want to recommend that EDI training should be mandatory for members, did we cover that off properly? Yeah. Okay. Sorry, I did ask and nobody disagreed, so I presumed that we all agreed to it. Okay? Sorry for my presumption.
Sorry, Chair. I mean, there's a number of recommendations. I assume they're all agreed the way you summarised, but mine specifically was mandatory for members of the Senior Officer Employment Committee. Obviously, you can mandate it for that because you can prevent a member from serving on that committee, or as a whip, I could prevent our members from serving on that committee if they haven't got the training, which you can't quite mandate in the same way for all members. So I assume that was all wrapped up in your conclusions, and if that's the case, then I'm happy with that.
Deborah's nodding, yes. So she's took the nose. So and you agreed to that, didn't you? Anyway, the officers agreed. Thank you for reiterating that, Councillor Otten, and thank you again. I will now finish the meeting.